Hey folks, this is Becky DeCoyster with Wellness Connection of Maine. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful spring day to talk about a very spring-like event, and that is getting our gardens started. We are here in the studio with producer Ben, who's making it all happen on the tech side, and I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit about growing your own medicine today with you. We did have some folks mail in questions ahead of time, and that was very helpful, so thank you if you did that. If you did not think to do that, I think that there may be some questions as we go through the presentation, and in that case, you will see on your screen a little talk bubble, and if you click on that, you can submit your questions there, and we will get to them as quickly as we can. Producer Ben will be fielding those, so feel free to give him a shout out there. Again, we're talking about growing your own medical cannabis today, and this really is an introduction for beginning gardeners. Our next month's webinar is going to take up where we leave off today and get into the vegetative and mature flowering stages. Today we're going to talk about preparing to garden, either indoors or out. We're going to talk about some considerations that we need to think about before we make a commitment like this, because it is, well, on the one hand, it is a weed, and she does grow that way, but to really cultivate a medical grade product, it requires some time, it can require some money, and so it's important for us to think through these things before we dive in and get our feet wet or our fingers dirty. So that being said, again, I'm Becky. I'm here with you to talk about growing medical cannabis today, and if you have questions, use that chat bubble at the top of your screen, and we will get to them just as quickly as we can. So let's dive on in, and I want to start with what does Maine's law say? It might surprise some folks to know that not every medical cannabis state allows patients to grow their own medicine, and actually some of the newly legal adult use states do not allow home cultivation. And so it's important for us to appreciate the fact that we live in a state that encourages patients and allows them to grow a healing plant for themselves in their own homes. So what does the law specifically say? And this is not out of the regulations. This is out of the underlying statute. This is the law that gives us the right to cultivate this healing medicine. And it says a qualifying patient may, and they start with possession, we can possess up to 2.5 ounces of prepared marijuana and an incidental amount of marijuana. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the idea that, 2.5 ounces is all you might get out of growing your 6 mature plants. But for the time being, we can have 2.5 ounces prepared marijuana in our homes, on our persons, and an incidental amount of unprepared, so uncured, unpackaged, unprocessed. And then here's the real meat of the law that underscores this right that we have to grow. So we can cultivate or designate a primary caregiver to cultivate up to a total of 6 mature marijuana plants. Now, a mature plant, under the definitions in the regulations, is a flowering female, and they include some size qualifications. We'll also talk about that further along the line when we get into vegetative and flowering cycles. Please note that your mature plant count may not exceed 6. Now, you can start with many cuttings or seedlings. You can have up to 12 juvenile plants, but once they start to flower, you need to cull down to 6 flowering females in order to be working within the law. So you can see that we can also have harvested marijuana in varying stages of processing so that we can meet our own personal needs, okay? And then look at that last sentence there, 2 or more qualifying patients who are members of the same household. So if you're living with another patient and you're both cultivating your own, you can share one enclosed locked facility. So you could have 12 mature flowering plants if there are 2 of you who are patients in your household. So this is the law. This is again, something that not every medical marijuana state has, and something that we should be thankful for and proud of. Okay, so you've decided that you want the experience of growing your own medicine. And that's fantastic, and we support that. There is nothing more empowering than being able to provide for yourself in that way. But before you dive right in, it is helpful to consider some basic questions. And you can see on the screen here, right there in the middle, am I going to grow indoors or out? Now, with modern technology, what you see in that center picture there is a fully enclosed indoor growing box to flower plants in. There is some odor control built into it, which is a consideration, but you can also see that they're still venting out that window over the washer and the dryer. So indoor growing, it can be as simple as putting a plant in your windowsill. It can also be as complex and as expensive as investing in some quality equipment and some infrastructure for your HVAC needs and things like that. So, and this question is going to be guided and informed by where you live. I mean, if you live in your own home, if you are, if you don't have to worry about near neighbors getting offended by the sight or the smell of the plants, then maybe, an indoor grow, turning a basement closet into a grow room is an option for you. If you choose to grow outside, again, that can be less expensive in terms of equipment because Mother Nature is doing more of the work outdoors. But you have to consider, am I going to be able to fence this in keeping with the state law that it's in an enclosed, locked facility? Do I have neighbors nearby who are going to maybe smell that, and will that cause, unwanted attention? This as long as this plant is illegal for general adult use, there will be a black market for it, and unfortunately, that means that outdoor growers, and indoor growers, need to be sensitive and cautious about who they let know that they are growing this medicine. You don't want to invite unwanted attention or visitors who seek to make off with your hard, your hard work, your good medicine. To the left there, what kind of privacy, both indoors and out? Again, if you're in a house and you want to, convert a closet or a room into a small grow facility, do you have roommates? Do you often have people over? And if so, do you trust every single one of those folks to know what you're doing? So you want to consider your privacy situation. And that ties right into the land. Someone who lives in downtown Portland or Augusta, even in a greenhouse in a backyard, I think you're more likely to have a neighbor or neighbors who get nosy. The plant is a beautiful thing, but when she is flowering, she is very fragrant, and that can be difficult to control. So think about that. That might be a factor in bringing you back indoors instead of choosing an outdoor grow. Wherever you are, think about pets and think about kids. We know that this is a very safe plant, but you don't want any accidental ingestion on the part of pets or kids or anyone else. If you have an elder with dementia living with you, how are you going to make sure that your plants don't present a problem for them? Down at the bottom, think about your time. This is something that, especially if you're indoor, if you're choosing to grow indoors, this plant doesn't know when it's Christmas. She's going to need, if you're growing her indoors, she's going to need you to take the place of Mother Nature in terms of watering and the light that they get and the airflow. You're essentially becoming Mother Nature, and that is a time-consuming job. And again, there are technological fixes. You can, put a watering system in that operates on a timer. You can, obviously set your lights up on a timer and things like that, but it might not be, possible for you to take a 2-week vacation in the middle of your grow cycle. So consider that as well. Again, if you're outdoors, Mother Nature is doing more of the work, but plants still need some loving attention. They need to be pruned. They need to be checked for unwanted pests or mildews. And so that's a consideration for you. And then finally, money. And that, for some folks, might be the deciding factor. Is it just simply a matter of I can afford to put a few plants outdoors in a private fenced area and not have to spend the money on an interior infrastructure, set up with HVAC and lighting and the associated electrical burdens and things like that. So these are all considerations before you jump in with both feet. And I think that if you think of each of those concerns, you'll find yourself the choice of indoor or out will probably become pretty apparent to you. All right. Indoors or out, there are some basic needs. I mean, certainly you can toss some seeds out on the yard and forget about them and see what you get. But we're trying to grow for a medical product here. And so there are some very basic needs. Obviously, you're going to have to start with genetics, and we will talk about sourcing, which is probably the hardest part of getting started with growing, because even though our state law allows us to grow medicine, there is no clear path for somebody to obtain seeds or cuttings. On the federal level, it is illegal to sell any part of the marijuana plant across state lines, and it can be difficult for somebody to find another person who has and is willing to share cuttings and things like that. So we have some solutions for you that we will talk about. Indoors, you're going to need a growing medium, and that can be as simple as some natural traditional potting soil, and all the way up to a full hydroponic system. And so, these will also affect the cost. You can do it very, very low cost, or you can, again, spend hundreds of dollars in developing a system that requires specific types of growing media. Nutrients, again, outdoors, pretty much, Mother Nature is going to take care of that. You certainly want to make sure that they're getting enough water. Indoors, you typically need to enhance the environment by providing some sorts of nutrients. And so we'll talk about what some of those options are when we get to that point. Light and heat. Again, outside, Mother Nature does it. Inside, you're Mother Nature. And so those are considerations. If you plan to grow year-round indoors in Maine, you need to have a heating solution as well as a cooling solution for our sometimes warm summers. And ventilation and airflow. You're going to want some pots with good drainage. No matter what growing medium you're using, waterlogged plants are not going to produce the level of medicine that you'll want. If you're inside, you're going to want a pH tester and a parts per milliliter tester. And these are items that you can get at a garden store, and they will help you when you're mixing up those nutrients and trying to provide in the water everything that the plant would need to thrive. And indoors or out, you will want a jeweler's loupe or a handheld microscope, and this will come in handy throughout the life of the plants. Number one, when you're doing inspections to make sure you don't have any unwanted pests or mildews, that can really help to get up close and identify what's going on, on the leaves. And then when we get towards harvest, that loupe or microscope is going to be your main tool for determining when you want to harvest, when the plants are ready and the trichomes are at their peak for the effect that you want. So, and those can be as inexpensive as $25, all the way up to, a couple of $100 if you really want a fine high quality product. A little bit like vaporizers. That way you can get one anywhere along the pricing spectrum. So let's see what we have next. So how much do you want to spend? And this, you can make it as inexpensive or as expensive as you have the time and the money and the inclination for. So typically genetics, the going expense, whether you're obtaining seeds from somebody who is selling them in state or providing them, giving them away in state, or whether you're taking cuttings, or trying to reimburse somebody for the cost of a cutting, expect to spend between $10 and $15 per plant, and that's a pretty standard price actually around the medical cannabis states that do allow growing. This is a pretty standard price range there. In terms of equipment, and here I do include security, and I started at $75, and that's a very basic indoor grow. A couple of potting buckets, some growing medium, some inexpensive light solutions, and maybe a fan. And then for a more advanced indoor grow, I mean, 300. Think of that as like the baseline of the upper end. You can really you can again make it as complex or as simple as you wish. You can go and get a pre-made box like we saw in that first slide and set that up and not have to think too much about anything else. Or you can, again, revamp an entire room and incur costs in terms of, venting and timing and all of those things. And then outdoor, $50 for a very basic grow, $200 plus if you are going to be doing very large plants, if you're going to have to invest in some netting to hold them up as they get older. And then also think about security, because we do need to grow in enclosed, locked facilities. So if you have, a garden fence already set up, then you're set. But if you need to invest in, a wooden fence that's 6 feet or 8 feet tall, that can be quite expensive. So your nutrients, including light and energy, you should expect to spend inside, $200 and up. Outside, Mother Nature gives them to you for free, but you can still choose to supplement and enhance the nutrient levels when you water your outdoor plants, if you do. So we're looking at a range, anywhere from $60 to get started with an outdoor setup, up to 300, all the way up. I mean, you can spend thousands if you really want to get into the technology on the indoor side. So again, think about your living situation. Think about whether there's going to be kids around. Think about, if you're already set up to garden and you have a greenhouse that locks, you're in good shape. If you're living down in Portland or in Augusta, look at how close those apartments are together and think about the odor control and filtration needs that you're going to have in a shared living situation. So. All right, where will we source our genetics? We're going to talk in this session today about the two basic ways to get started, and you see them here. You can find seeds and sprout them, or you can find clones, which are basically cuttings off of a live mother plant, and they are genetic copies of that mother plant. Again, because the state did not, they actually called it the original sin. When we were, doing the task force and they were implementing this law, we asked the task force, how are we supposed to get this? Where's the protection for somebody who is, trying to obtain the actual starter genetics material? And they said, you know what? It's the original sin. We don't want to know. Don't tell us, and we're not going to give you any answers. So we're operating in kind of a gray area here, and so I'm going to give you the best information that I can. Number one, again, it is illegal to sell seeds in the United States, or get them overseas and bring them into the United States. The federal government is opposed to the whole plant, and that includes everything from seed to finished product. That being said, there are companies, and Google can be your friend here, there are companies that provide seeds strictly for novelty purposes, and so you can look into that. And then if you know somebody who is growing and breeding, you can ask if they have some seeds. And if you do end up with seeds, even seeds that sometimes we can find in our prepared marijuana, you want to look for a richer, darker outer shell. I'm not saying that a lighter shell won't sprout and that the genetics won't be hardy, but it seems that a darker, harder shelled seed results most of the time in a healthier, hardier plant. And with a seed, basically you sprout it. You get a wet piece of paper towel, and you can put the seeds in there and leave it in a cool, dark area for a few days, and you should start to see these little tap roots start to pop out. Okay, and then you can plant those. Also note that in the majority of cases, seeds are both male and female. So you might get 10 seeds, and 6 of them turn out to be male, and 4 of them turn out to be female. And the females are the only, they're the only type of cannabis that produce the medicinal flowers. So unless you're breeding a male plant, you want to get rid of it as soon as you can. And so that's something for folks who are starting from seed to be aware of. Now, there are some breeders who will provide seeds that they say are feminized, and so that means that all of the seeds should grow into female plants. And there is great debate back and forth over whether that's those feminized seeds are good genetics or something close to an abomination. There's a school of thought that thinks that deliberately feminized seeds have genetic stressors that will result in less potent, less thriving plants. There's also seeds now that are auto-flower, where they're not tied to a light cycle, and the plant itself will put itself into flower without you having to worry about how much light you're giving them. And the same, sort of debate rages about those as well. So, you can get feminized seeds, you can get auto-flowering seeds, but there is some thought that those might not turn out to make the best medicine. And if you get non-feminized seeds, know that it's the luck of the draw. You might get 7 females and 3 males. You might get 5 and 5. And again, unless you plan to breed plants, once you have identified a male plant, when we're growing for medicine, we want to cull that and get rid of that. So. And then there's clones. So clones are cuttings, and it's very similar to, taking a cutting off of your friend's fern or spider plant and starting it. Clones come from mother plants, and these are female plants that are never put into flower. They are identified as having strong genetics, being good growers, healthy root systems, and so instead of putting a plant like that into flower, sometimes somebody will leave it in its vegetative state and never change the light cycle to start it into flowering, and they will clip individual leaf bracts off of that mother plant and root them using a rooting solution, and we'll talk more about that at the end of this session. And then each of those plants is a genetic copy, a clone, of the mother plant. Again, Google can be your friend here. There are, swaps that are set up sometimes, and folks can exchange genetics. I should also point out that under Maine law, it is legal for 2 medical cannabis patients to exchange medicine without any payment taking place. So swapping, giving somebody genetic material under state law is legal. as is giving finished product to somebody without asking for payment for that, as long as both parties are patients. So, all right, now let's look at how much time we have. and again, this is a commitment, and it's important to know what we're getting into before we dive right in. So let's say we start from seeds, all right, and we've got this nice, pretty dark brown set of seeds, and we're going to wrap them up in some wet paper towel and put them in a kind of a warm, dark place for a couple of days and wait until those tap roots come out. That might happen within, a day or two. It might happen within 7 days. If you have tried to germinate a seed and it has not sprouted by about 7 days, you can give it another day or two, but sometimes you get a dud, I guess. And so I will say that if your source is a healthy plant, you should get a pretty good germination rate out of your seeds. So we've got a week into the germination. Then we're going to plant these beautiful little starter babies, and we're going to call those seedlings. And that's going to be about 14 days, where that 14 days is spent making sure that each of those little baby girls grows a healthy set of roots and starts building a strong center stalk. Okay, seedlings like this need a slightly different environment. We'll talk more about this, but they need a higher humidity. They can tolerate a little bit more of a moist soil or starter mix. So that's going to be about, we're into 3 weeks now. The next step, once we've established these very healthy little seedlings, we are going to put them into the vegetative state. So when they're seedlings, we want to give them as much light as possible, because light basically is part of their food. When we get into the vegetative stage, we're going to change the type of light and the duration of light. Some people do, 24 hours of light throughout the vegetative stage. Other folks prefer an 18 on and 6 off cycle. There are, differing opinions about how both of those options work. Either way, your veg state can go from 2 weeks if you don't, if you want to grow short plants maybe and do more of a lollipop style where you have a few 12-inch colas on each plant. That can, you can be ready to go into flowering within 2 weeks. More likely, you're going to want to put your plants into veg for, a month, 2 months, and that will also tie in. That will also tie into whether you're growing indoors or out. Outside, if you are, in a private location, you might not mind having an 8-foot tall plant, but indoors, that might be a little bit more than you want. So let's say, for vegetative state, let's say that we're going to go 6 weeks, which puts us at 9 weeks here. The next stage is flowering, and here we're going to change the light cycle. We're going to switch to 12 on and 12 off. That tells the plant, oh my gosh, fall is coming, I had better reproduce. And since we have either started with female clones or culled out our male seedlings back in the vegetative stage, we're going to put all of our female plants into flowering 12 on, 12 off, and that is going to last from 6 to 16 weeks. 6 weeks is if you have an indica, a very, fast finishing indica. Some of them only need 6 weeks, 7 weeks to flower and become, medically, therapeutically helpful. If you have a sativa plant, that, you may be into 10, 12 weeks. And a 16-week pure sativa is not unheard of. So the genetic choices that you have made are going to govern this. I would say 7 to 12 weeks is a pretty good mid-range for most strains, remembering that most strains these days are hybrids. They're a little bit indica and a little bit sativa. So you might have something that looks more sativa but finishes more like an indica more quickly. You might have an indica-looking plant that you just keep waiting and waiting, and those trichomes just aren't quite there yet. So there's a lot of variation here. Then we're going to harvest and dry, and the drying process, depending on how environmentally dialed in your drying area is, can take between 3 and 10 days. You don't want to dry too fast. Some folks will say, oh, I use a dehydrator, or I get my humidity way down to levels in the 20s. What you'll end up with is a very crispy and harsh medicine. And if you're going to inhale or try and vaporize that, it's not going to be as pleasant. So you want to be moderate in your drying. Okay, and we'll talk about how to tell when it's really dry but not too dry. We'll talk about that when we get to that stage. And then finally, curing. Curing is overlooked too much of the time. In the same way that I guess wines need to mellow, curing is a process of finishing the plant that will affect its flavor and its effect. Once a medicine is dry, you can certainly use it right away, but again, it will be harsher and the flavors might not be as pleasant. Curing involves keeping the plants in, say, a sealed jar like you see there, and popping the lid off and on a couple of times a day, and letting a little bit of air in, and then just letting it sit in a ideally a dark place. Curing can take 2 to 6 weeks. It's an extra step. But you will appreciate the results that you end up with if you cure your medicine. So looking at that full spectrum, we're into a, well, let's see, 3 weeks, let's say 2 months, 3 months. You can be looking at a 4-month commitment. Now, during some of the time, the plants might not need as much of your attention. Certainly, if you're indoors, the seedlings, as long as you keep them moist every day, they're going to be okay. The veg plants, you don't want to ever let them dry out, but if your lights are on a timer, you can step away from them for a few days in a row, but you don't want to be gone too long, especially if you don't have an automated watering system or somebody that you trust to come in and take care of them for you. The flowering stage, again, the plant will do its own thing, but we want to be looking at it in terms of the plant structure. We want to be making sure that our airflow is good. We want to be looking for pests or any sort of problems developing. So never a great idea to step away from them for too very long. So again, and if some of these stages, if your harvest stage falls in the middle of Thanksgiving, you have a choice to maybe invite the whole family to help you, or it might impact your ability to participate in family activities. So, all right. So let's talk about getting started from seed. Let's say that you have a friend who is a breeder and has gifted you some beautiful dark brown seeds. Look how pretty those are there. And you're ready to get started. So the first thing that we're going to do, again, is remember that seeds have the following needs. They need warmth, they need moisture, they actually need to be left alone. They need a little bit of peace, and they need to be treated gently, especially once those tap roots start popping out. So as I mentioned, it's a pretty simple method to germinate a seed by dampening paper towels and laying the seeds on top of that, and then fold the paper towel over it. Some people will, just leave that on a plate in a kitchen cabinet or in a closet, someplace dark but warm. Some folks will cover the plate with another plate to increase the trapped heat in there and retain the moisture. Know that if you don't cover the top of the top wet towel with another plate, you're going to need to keep moistening that towel every day. And I think you can kind of see from that picture. I'm not talking damp and like wrung out. We want the towel to be soaked, and both bottom and top. And again, you're going to check. Put them aside, and then give it 2-3 days, and then take a peek. And you might start seeing those little tap roots coming out Again, that can take up to 7 days, maybe 10. Although after 7, I'd be getting worried. So after 7 days, you're going to see most of your seeds. If you're starting with healthy seed stock, you're going to see most of them popping like this, and hopefully all of them. And what we're going to do with those is get a substrate. Now, you can put them directly into soil. You can go and grab some potting soil and put these little babies in tiny, you could start them in a shot glass, honestly. Or you can invest in these small potting pods, and they come in different shapes and sizes. Some of them are round, and these have a pre-drilled little hole in them that you put the seed into. And you see in this picture, you can do this with your pinky finger too. Just make a little depression, and you want to put that taproot down, facing down, and bury your seed about 1/4 of an inch, right? And then cover it over. And we're going to keep, again, these baby sprouts need these same things. They need warmth and moisture. They need to be left alone, and they need to be treated gently. Certainly when you're handling the seeds, when you're potting them, you might want to use a tweezers. You don't want to touch or damage those tap roots. That's the main food line for your baby plant. So if you have tiny delicate fingers and a soft touch, go ahead and pick them up. But otherwise, a set of tweezers or chopsticks can help you with the planting. Okay. After a couple of days, and again, now we've moved these into their starter soil in whatever kind of tiny, you want, maybe a 2x2 square, even a 1x1 inch square or container to sprout them in, and you want them in full light. You want them to have light 24 hours a day at this point. And within a couple of days, you're going to see what you see on the top right there. The very first leaves are going to be poking out. Those are called cotyledon leaves, and they don't look anything like the actual cannabis leaves that we see on a mature plant. You see on the bottom right there, those 2 rounded-edged leaves are going to be the first things that sprout. And you're going to think, oh my gosh, I got begonia seeds or something. But instead, those are the first seeds, or the first leaves. And then the second set will come out, and you'll see that it's actually the plant that you had hoped. So, all right, we're going to talk about getting started with clones, and then I know we've got some questions coming in, and I want to get to those. This session we're going to stop after clones, and then next session we'll talk about vegetative stage through or flowering, and then in the next session we'll talk about harvesting and curing, and take us through the actual steps of each of those processes. So again, let's say that you don't have access to seeds, and we're going to start with clones. You have a friend who's got a pretty mother plant, or even a vegetative plant that is definitely female, that looks to be healthy. As long as it's before she is put into flowering, you can take cuttings off of her. Okay. Clones have very similar needs to seeds, but they're a little hardier. They still need warmth. They need humidity. They need airflow, and that will help develop a nice, sturdy central stalk. And they, of course, need gentleness as well. So to take a clone cutting, we're going to take the branch, or a branch of a non-flowering plant. We're going to want to make sure that she is female, because whatever we root off of this is going to be the exact same. So if you clone a male plant, you're going to end up with a male flower. And you're going to do a cut below a node. And I hope that this is clear enough that you can see these nodes. It's a place where a branch comes off of a branch, or a small subset of leaves comes off of a branch. You're going to cut about a 1/2 inch below a node, and you want to cut at a 45-degree angle. You can do this with a very sharp pair of like surgical tape scissors. A lot of people do it with razors. just the tool doesn't matter. It does need to be sharp, and you should have some rubbing alcohol on hand. You should have some equipment set up. You need some rubbing alcohol to dip that blade into and keep it clean between cuts. So you see on the right there, we've taken a clipping very close to the node. It is at a 90-degree angle, and we have a few leaves. We have a healthy couple of leaves already on, above that cut. The next picture at the top right is dipping that cutting into something called rooting hormone or rooting solution. Now, this one happens to be an orange gel. We're not going to promote any specific brand, but suffice to say there are a number of options out there. There are powders, there are liquids. If you're curious, folks at the grow stores can help you. Maybe somebody you know who grows can say, hey, this has really worked for me, or get a couple and run a little experiment and try a few. So you've got your nice clean cut, and we're going to dip that in the rooting hormone. And then we're going to place it. Now, both of these bottom pictures show cloning happening and the rooting process starting in something called rock wool, and that's ROCKWOOL. Rock wool is not particularly environmentally friendly, so there are other options. There are soil-based and other types of clone rooting foundations. Rock wool is very popular because it's light, it's inexpensive, and as you can see in the bottom left-hand picture, you can go to a garden store and buy a tray, just like you see there, with a plastic cover to keep moisture in and manage your humidity, and it comes with those, with 50, typically 50 of the little rock wool cubes all lined up, and all you have to do is stick your cutting in each one. Again, there are different options. There are soil based pods that you soak in water and they expand. The sky is the limit here. So be aware of that. And then you will want to cover, you will definitely, whether you use rock wool or not, you'll want to get a tray with a hood like this. These should be about, I think $12. Because what that is going to do is retain that moisture, that humidity level that is so important for your baby plants, and that's what these are now. You see on the right-hand side, they have started to cut the edges off of some of the cloned leaves. You see at the top, there's a leaf that's got its edge cut off, and you also see on that top picture the image that shows the clone cuts. You can see that they've cut the tops of these leaves off here. That actually, it seems like you're torturing your plant, but you're not. That actually helps with the plant's respiration and can speed the growth and health of your baby plants. So we're going to, we've taken some cuttings. You don't want to only take 6, right? And here's why. Even though we know that these are all female plants, and why, we can only have 6 mature flowering plants, you will very quickly see that some of your clones are a little more healthy than others. And there is no limit on the number of small clones that you can have because of this. So what you'll want to do is grow, take maybe 24 cuttings. And within a week or so, you'll start to see, oh, this one's really taking off, and it has a beautiful, root base like you see on the right there. The internal, that central stalk is really, strong and resilient, and the one next to it is pretty, but it's just not as pretty. It's just not doing as well. Well, when the time comes to move things into the vegetative stage, you only want to take the strongest. You want to take that one, like the one on the right there, that's doing the best, that's going to turn into the healthiest, flowering female that you can. So you want to clone more than you need, and be prepared. Like, don't name each of your clones, because some of them you're going to have to cull, and in order to have the best possible crop at the end. I like that picture on the right as well, because at the bottom of that, you can see in the background there, those are some more seedlings that are just starting, and those are gosh, maybe just a couple of weeks old. So they're doing a couple of different styles here. So, all right, I do want to give you some good resources because there's so much out there. If you look on the left there, I just typed in marijuana growing, and over 2,000. And this is in the book department of Amazon, so there's a lot out there, and it can be very hard to get the signal separated from the noise. And so this is by no means an exhaustive list, and if your favorite is not on there, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be your favorite, and maybe if you have a favorite, you could share it in the chat space here. But these are some pretty reliable, solid books that we are aware have gotten folks through their first grow successfully. So at the bottom left, small spaces, big yields. If you're an indoor apartment grower, some great ideas in there. Mike Casadanca's book is pretty good and well written. I think that's something that we looked at for each of these two. Is there are some of them that just aren't very well written or easy to use. Ed Rosenthal's Closet Cultivator is a classic and a great starter book. It's very thin. On the top right, the Jorge Cervantes, that is literally the Bible. If you say the Bible to a cannabis grower, they will know that you're probably talking about Jorge Cervantes' book. It is daunting. I couldn't find a picture of it from the side, but it's about, 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick. Many different segments. He goes into a great amount of detail. If you are the science-minded, botany-minded individual who wants to really get into the technology and the science behind growing, this is a great book for you, and you'll learn a great deal from this book. By comparison, the Closet Cultivator is a fairly slim volume. And it very pared down. So, and then I found this free download of the Grow Bible online, and I thought that was worth sharing. Having looked through it, it seems like it's a fine educational piece, and we love the fact that it is free for download. And so, any of these will be a good and valuable resource for you. Look around, Amazon does have that fancy, you can look inside most books and get a sense of them now. And actually, Barnes & Noble and some of the other chain bookstores, for those of you who are still supporting bookstores both large and small, honestly, Longfellow's and some other indie bookstores are starting to carry a much wider variety of cannabis cultivation material than even 5 years ago we would have seen. So we've gone through what considerations you need to take into account. We've talked a little bit about the two different options for indoor or out. Your two options for starting with genetics, seeds to clones. And gotten you through the seedling stage. And I see that we do have some questions. Producer Ben, you want to shoot me? Okay, is it okay? I'm seeing it. Here we go. I don't know. Can you guys see this on my screen? Okay, good. So I have a question, and it says, is it legal for us to buy seeds online? If you go to any of those online sites, you will see that they are selling seeds for novelty purposes only. And I have never done that. I don't know what kind of legal cover that gives to the vendor or the purchaser. I do know of folks who have gone that route and have gotten, they placed an order and the order just never gets there. It gets held up at customs, but I don't know of anybody who has been arrested or otherwise prosecuted for doing that. Just know that technically, federally, it is illegal to transport, sell any part of the marijuana plant across state lines or to bring them into the country. So the short answer for that is the only way it would be legal well, it's not legal at the federal level, and at the state level, if there is an online seed breeder that is based in Maine, that would be state legal, but still not federally legal. So I hope that helps. Again, patients within the state are perfectly legally able to gift seeds, genetic material, cuttings to each other. So if that is an option for you, and again, Google is our friend, so is Facebook. There are some options out there. And I'm also seeing a question. Let's see. Is it legal for me to grow my plants at a friend's place that grows for him and his wife? Okay, we are all card holders in Maine. Okay, so the friend's place that grows for him and his wife. So friend and wife are both card holders, but you are somebody who does not live there. I think that technically the state would interpret the rules to say no, because as we saw on that first slide, you have to be members of the same household can grow together, but there's no actual provision for, say, I live in a house where there are kids and I don't want to grow there, so my friend producer Ben, who is also a patient, lets me grow in his facility. What I would recommend in that instance is to designate one of those friends as a caregiver for you. And that would allow them to grow plants on your behalf in their home. So that would be the way to do it. So I would say, Producer Ben, I want you to be my caregiver, so you are technically growing my plants. Producer Ben is nodding enthusiastically. And then we would go on the state's website and make sure that, I had gotten a designation form and filled out a designation form that said, I'm designating Producer Ben as my caregiver, and my plants are going to live at his house. So that's the solution for that one. All right. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Oh, great question. What exactly is harvested unprepared marijuana? The state does not make that very clear, and that's something that we are working on trying to clarify. So the Division of Licensing and Regulatory Services is a section of DHHS that regulates the medical marijuana program. And when they passed these laws and took ownership of this program, there were some gray areas, and things like this harvested unprepared marijuana is one of them that they have just not given us a satisfactory answer about. I would say that harvested and unprepared certainly includes anything that is hanging to dry, anything that is curing. I think that one sensible way to look at that is this product ready for use? Now, when we're producing it, it's pretty clear because we go through the packaging step. But if you're making your own medicine, that you might, as I said, you can smoke and use flowers that are still drying. Actually, it might not be the best, tasting stuff, but it will have a medical benefit. The good news here is that the state is not looking to over-regulate or punish medical patients who are clearly attempting to stay within the boundaries. Patients and caregivers are allowed to have 8 pounds of this excess or incidental medicine. And so, I think that 2.5 ounces of prepared medicine might be something that, is pardon me, it's ready to go. You're keeping it in your locked storage box, and then you have, the rest of your harvest is maybe in the jars still curing. But again, the state has not given us a very clear definition of that, and at the same time, they don't appear to be, looking at people who are making an effort to stay within the spirit of the law. And I know that's not a terribly satisfactory answer, but unfortunately, it is where we are. I think, when we think about growing, whether indoors or out, whether at our place or at a caregiver's place, what the state does not want to see is diversion. They don't want to see medicine going into the non-medical market that exists in Maine, and they certainly don't want to see it going, down into New Hampshire or Massachusetts. And so, a patient who has got their 6 flowering plants, and they've got their most recent harvest in various stages of drying and curing, and maybe vacuum packed and sealed, but not in small amounts. You take a half a pound or a pound and you seal that and put that away. I don't think that's what they're looking for. I think they're looking for folks who are very clearly and blatantly filling their backyards with, I don't know, 25 plants or something like that. Patients who are making an effort to stay within the boundaries of the law don't seem to be, in general, getting persecuted, although I'm thinking now of a couple of instances, both of them outdoor growers, where neighbor complaints invited unwanted law enforcement attention. And that's actually something, maybe, Producer Ben, we should remember this. I think if we could get maybe a Chief Saucechuck or some member of law enforcement to come and sit down with us sometime for one of these webinars and ask them, because I get the sense that medical cannabis is not law enforcement's biggest priority. And I know certainly that for the most part, patients who are, again, trying to grow responsibly don't seem to be getting in trouble, unless there is a nosy neighbor or an irate roommate or a grumpy ex-spouse. In those cases, that can invite unwanted law enforcement attention. And that's unfortunate, but something that we need to be aware of. And it goes back to, who really needs to know that you're growing your own medicine? So those are my thoughts on that one. We have, if growing outside, how large of a container should I use? Well, how large of a beautiful plant would you want to end up with? We are definitely going to talk in more detail about, the flowering stage outside. I would say that, if you're just starting with your clones, you can start a clone in a red Solo cup. You can use that for your seedlings if you're starting from seed. And it's going to be a month, 6 weeks or so before those seedlings are ready to be moved outside and put on their own. A lot of folks go with just the 5-gallon Home Depot bucket size, and you can get a nice yield and harvest out of that. You can also buy these. You've probably seen the burlap wrapped sort of root ball containers that you'll go to a nursery and see maybe a fruit tree put in. You can use those and make those as big as or as small as you want. I think a 5-gallon bucket is a good place to start. And then there are also folks who will take they'll veg in the 5-gallon bucket and then transplant just into a hole in the ground with a burlap liner. To sort of hold out unwanted pests that might attack the root system. And so that's another option. And I've seen folks dig out a 5x5 square and put the plant in the middle of that with 4 posts, and netting on each side. So that question of how big a container. Again, a 5-gallon bucket will get you through veg, and then once you start moving towards flowering, it really depends on your space situation. Remember that if you're growing outdoors under state law, it has to be in an enclosed, locked facility or space. And you don't necessarily want folks to be able to see the tops of your babies over your enclosed locked space. So consider that as well. The larger the container, the larger the finished flowers you're going to get. And there are a lot of factors involved in that. All right. I see we're hitting the 1 o'clock mark, which this time always goes so fast. We have time to take one more question if there are any. And I'm not seeing any. I'll tell you what, if you think about something and you're driving along this afternoon and you think, oh, I should have asked this, you can always email us at info@mainewellness.org. You can check us out on Facebook as well and leave us a message there. Please know that next month our webinar is going to take us from the seedling stage up through the end of the day you're ready to harvest. And we're going to be joined, actually we'll be broadcasting that one from our central cultivation facility, and we will be joined by a couple of our cultivation gurus, and they will be super happy to answer your questions about nutrients, about pest control, about troubleshooting, all of these wonderful and complex and fascinating subjects. So that's next, the last Thursday in April, April 28th at noon. And producer Ben will get this back up and edited and online by this afternoon. He's given me the thumbs up, so you'll be able to go back and review these slides. Again, I'm Becky DeCloister with Wellness Connection of Maine, joined by producer Ben, and it has been a pleasure spending an hour with you. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day and grow well this spring. Thanks so much. Bye.